Good evening and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's Roundtable, AUA Match 2021, as presented by American University of Antigua College of Medicine. This series of live streamed roundtables feature our very own esteemed alumni and is dedicated to giving you, our audience, a chance to connect with alumni and faculty. My name is Gerald Wargo, and I am the Associate Vice President for Enrollment Management with American University of Antigua College of Medicine. Today's discussion, AUA Match 2021, provides us with a unique opportunity for you to get an inside look at what our students did to secure their residencies, as well as what esteemed program directors are looking for when selecting residency candidates. Now, as you may know, last week was Match Week, which takes place in the third week of March, and it's the period of time when applicants and programs learn the results of their matches. Tens and thousands of medical students find out on this day whether they attained a spot in a residency training program and can go on to become a licensed physician in the United States. In celebration of this day, AUA would like to acknowledge and highlight just a few of our AUA students who have gone on to become program directors, 2021 matches, and a pre-match student. We're very excited to introduce you to our alumni, but before we get started, a little housekeeping. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the comments. I'll bring them up during the presentation as well, and also during the Q&A session at the end of tonight's webinar. Now let's meet our panelists, shall we? First, in 2009, a 2009 graduate, Dr. Kevin Haas. Kevin is now working as an assistant professor of clinical medicine, associate program director for interventional pulmonary in Chicago, Illinois. Dr. Haas, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, hi, welcome. Thanks for having me. Jerry just said I finished AUA in 2009, so now it's 12 years ago. It's been a little bit of time. And then from AUA, I went to Louisiana for internal medicine residency, came back to Chicago for pulmonary and critical care fellowship, and then did an additional year of procedural training in St. Louis before I came back in Chicago, where I've been a faculty member and assistant program director with our pulmonary and critical care training program.
Sounds like you have a lot on your plate right now, Dr. Haas. Thanks for joining tonight.
Welcome. Glad to be here.
Great. Next up, we have a 2015 graduate, Dr. Mayank Ohri, who is an associate professor and academic hospitalist at Central Michigan University. Dr. Ohri, would you like to say a few words?
Sure. Good evening, and thank you for having me. I joined AUA in 2009, and I'm currently working as an associate professor of clinical medicine at Central Michigan University. I'm currently working with the internal medicine residency program, and I'm also completing my MBA and master's business administration.
Wow, so you keep yourself busy too, always taking on new challenges.
Yeah.
Our next three individuals that I'd like to introduce are people that have recently just matched, which is always very exciting. So let us introduce our 2020 new med graduate, Serene Musallam. I'm going to say your name wrong, Serene, and I got it right the other day. Musallam. Dr. Musallam.
Hi, everyone. So you did get it right the other day, so it's Musallam. So it's Serene Musallam. Don't worry about it.
Thank you.
And yes, as Jerry said, I'm a class of 2020 graduate. And since graduating, in addition to applying, I've been teaching ACLS, BLS, and PALS to healthcare providers, certifying them, and just staying in contact with the medical field in that way, and learned a lot for sure as an instructor, in addition to teaching. And I'm a California native, and I matched into internal medicine in my first choice in Phoenix, Arizona at Abrazo Health Network.
That's fantastic. Serene, where are you originally from, and how did you find your way to AUA?
Oh, yes. So I'm originally from Northern California. Everybody knows the Bay Area. I'm a little outside the Bay Area near Napa Valley, where the lovely wine is located. And I joined AUA in 2015 and actually loved the island. And here I am now. And I did my clinicals in the Northeast. I was trying to increase my experience in the demographic areas. So I was in New York, in Brooklyn, and in the University of Maryland and Ohio.
Wow. So you've gone from California to the East Coast. Now you're going back to Arizona. So you're traveling, you're bouncing around.
Exactly. Great
Let's
early.
introduce. Oh, go ahead. What's that?
It's also a great early birthday gift too to have this match.
Well, happy birthday and congratulations on matching. That's an incredible accomplishment. Let's introduce our next newest match. This is Dr. Maria Saba. Dr. Saba, want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for letting me be here. And just a little about myself. I recently graduated in December of 2020, and I just found out that I matched in emergency medicine, which is the best specialty there is. And I'll be going to start my training in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And I love the warmth. I love the sun. That's one of the reasons I guess I chose AUA, and I kind of wanted to stay warm. So I'm so happy and excited about that. Since graduating, I've actually been doing a lot of teaching as well. I teach Step 1 and Step 2 CK. I love students. I love teaching. I find it very rewarding, and I really hope to do that in residency as well. In addition, I've been helping with like the vaccinating efforts. I have a remote job where I help to register people for vaccines in Texas for the COVID vaccines.
Great. And I think you have a bit of an interesting story as well. Is it your husband or your boyfriend that also matched with you?
Yeah, so I actually met my boyfriend in Med 1. We met in cardiology class, which is super cheesy. He just found out he matched in a preliminary surgery at University of Arizona in Tucson. So we're a little bit sad we're yet to be apart for 1 year, but we're hoping that by doing networking and making connections, we're hoping to reunite next year.
Awesome. And we'll come back to you for lots more questions as we go through tonight. We have one more recent match with us, and this particular doctor is a little bit different, as she didn't find out that she matched last week. She found out about 2 months ago. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Lena Ibrahim. And Dr. Lena, could you tell us a little bit about your story?
Hello, good evening. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Lena Ibrahim, originally from Antigua. So I did the whole pre-med AUA program and then moved on to clinicals. I found out I pre-matched January 28th. So right after the interview, they called me and, they offered me the position on the spot, and I couldn't not accept it.
How could you, right?
So I've been rejoicing since January. And since graduating, I graduated September 2020. Since graduating, I started the fellowship program that AUA offers on the island, the Graduating Teaching Fellowship. So I'll be doing that until starting residency July 1st.
And you're doing your residency up in New York City. Did you mention that already?
No, yeah, so I matched at Brookdale University Medical Center in Brooklyn.
Right, so I have Dr. Ibrahim going from sunny Antigua to New York City. And we have our other two matches going to Arizona and California. Not a bad gig. Congratulations to all of you guys. Let's go on and talk a little bit with our alumni that have been out in the field for a little bit, Dr. Haas and Dr. Ohri, and hear a little bit about their experiences. Dr. Ohri and Dr. Haas, both of you have amazing backgrounds. I wanted you both to have a chance to give our audience a deeper understanding of how you came to be in your current roles in your different hospitals. So, Dr. Ohri, would you like to talk a little bit about your path to where you are now?
Sure. So I completed my internal medicine residency at Kendall Regional Medical Center in Miami, Florida. After I completed it, I had an opportunity to join a private practice, but one that I really missed was the academic setting. And I had a great opportunity at Central Michigan University to be part of the residency program, to be able to educate, teach the new internal medicine residents, as well as the medical students down there. So it's extremely exciting to be part of that environment, because private practice is much different how academic training center is.
So you have a passion for not only medicine but also teaching as well.
Yeah, and I think that you really have to that's really important when you're teaching your internal medicine residents, because there's a component which is completely different when you're doing private practice versus actively teaching and engaging with students and residents and doing bedside rounds. So that always keeps me up to date with new literature, and it's an exciting part to be part of it.
Great, thank you, Dr. Ohri. Dr. Haas, give us a little bit of a more in-depth look at your pathway.
Yeah, I think I'm going to echo a few things.
I think so, right? It's great.
Said. So essentially, when I finished AUA, I kind of went around a little bit for training. Always wanted to kind of come back to a sort of academic environment, and I think that comes from even what Dr. Saba was saying, even early on, and some of the other students, I'm sure, when you like to teach, it just kind of grows on you a little bit, and you always want to stay in that environment. And like Dr. Ohri was saying, the students themselves keep you on your toes a little bit, and keeps you fresh, and they make you read to stay up on what's going on. But I think really for how I really got into it, for better or worse, I spent a lot of time with medical students, fellows, and residents teaching procedural techniques. So I just really wanted to be involved in the formal curriculum and training that goes on with our program. So that's really kind of how I got involved. It was slow it was no really one initial step, just a slow little progress over the years.
So Dr. Haas, a quick follow-up question. I believe you play a part in selecting the new residents at your hospital?
Yeah, so kind of similar to residents, I select fellows. So usually you've already kind of gone through a medicine residency, and now we're looking at subspecialty training. So when you finish, just for example, if you finish internal medicine residency, which is usually 3 years, you can go on and be a internal medicine doctor, or you can apply to cardiology or gastroenterology or the best specialty, pulmonary or critical care, or rheumatology and other things. And then that's where I kind of come into play. You apply for a fellowship, and it's still the same process through the match and everything.
Okay. And Dr. Ohri, I know that you have a couple hats that you wear, but you also play a role in helping your location select new residents. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. So each season, as locations open up, or the new season for residencies open up, we do interview quite a bit of resident applicants, and we try to select the ones that we have an opportunity to speak with and see and communicate with. Obviously, with the pandemic, it's been a little bit difficult and different, but it's still an exciting process, kind of getting to know everyone and what they're bringing into the table, because every applicant is extremely unique, and it's not they're only interviewing us, we're also interviewing. It's a symbiotic relationship, so we're both interviewing each other, kind of understanding more about the applicant, and they're also understanding more about our residency program in terms of what we offer.
Let's stay on that line, Dr. Ohri, because you mentioned the pandemic, and we all know that the pandemic has changed our world, has in so many different ways. But how did the pandemic affect the match cycle this year? Did it affect it in any way? Your thoughts?
Right. So, I mean, it's obviously been difficult in terms of, having more applicants come in and interviewing. So a lot of them were done virtually. And I think that, they have a set of advantages as well as disadvantages. So I think one of the advantages of being able to virtually conduct an interview is that it gets very intimidating when you have a lot of panelists. So you have your program director, you have your associate program director, then you have rest of the GME faculty. So that part kind of gets taken away through a virtual conversation. And I think that has its own advantages as well as disadvantages. So it has been different, but we tried our very best to accommodate as much as we could.
I bet. How many, so for, let's say, one residency spot, how many candidates would you actually interview before making a selection?
Right. So our total applicants to our university were around 5,000. Out of the 5,000, a lot of them get filtered out based on their step scores, their if they have any ties to the area. But mainly it's mainly your step scores. That's really going to kind of help filter out the first initial set, and then after that we have approximately 100 to 200 applicants that we're interested in interviewing. So we'd send out those, and out of the 100 or 200 applicants, we obviously have we have around 8 positions. So every residency program is different, but at our place it's around 8 students per 8 residents per academic year.
Okay, great. Dr. Haas, Similar question. The pandemic, did it force your particular hospital to do things differently? And were there advantages and disadvantages to this year's interviewing cycle?
Yeah, so I mean, I fully agree with what Dr. Wargo was saying. I think we ended up getting more applications than we usually do. I think part of that's just convenience. Nobody has to travel. And everything mostly could be virtual. Our entire program was virtual interviews the whole season. We didn't do anything in person. It required a little more kind of plan on our part. We had to create a video to send to, interview candidates so they can get an idea of what our program was like. There was limited interaction between the trainees interviewing and our own people, interacting with them. Usually we would have some sort of dinner or get together the night before the interview to kind of help loosen everybody up a little bit. So we couldn't do that. Hopefully this next year it won't be as difficult. But just kind of echo some things that were said. We get all these applications and there's a lot for each position.
Yeah.
And from that large number, we have to take all these applications and, for lack of a better term, we have to quantify them. We have to essentially give everybody a number. And, that's based on like step scores, your med school, your personal statement, your community service, and your research. Somehow we all have to quantify that to a number. And then from that number, whether or not you get an interview is kind of whether you make a certain cutoff point. Now, different categories mean different things. Step scores are important. Community service and things like that. Letters of recommendation are a huge thing that can push really people over the top. So those are extremely important. We can maybe talk about those later, but there's just kind of a few things.
No, I appreciate that. Let me actually bring in the ladies right now because they all just went through the match cycle. So doctors, you just heard what Dr. Ohri and Dr. Haas said as far as what they look for at their particular locations when they're looking at new resident applications. When we think about the pandemic this past year, how do you think that impacted your interviewing cycle? So maybe we'll direct it to Dr. Musallam first. And do you think, how do you think the pandemic impacted your interviewing cycle this year?
So this is the big question that I know everybody answered to. So the pandemic definitely had its pros and cons in terms of how it affected the match.
Right.
Because everyone wants to begin with cons usually with the pandemic, but some pros was we didn't actually have to spend that much money flying to residency interviews. Have to worry about like room and board, food, and just the overall. Sometimes there's like an intrinsic stress to locating the correct building to make sure you're on time to your residency, physically there, sweaty palms, all these things kind of go away. And you're kind of having the home advantage. It's kind of like playing in your own field and you're in your own comfort zone. You get to sit on your own chair. It's kind of like state dependent, like comfort. And for me, I wanted to wear top to bottom professional clothes. I didn't feel like it was necessary. I mean, it was definitely comfortable. You could wear like whatever shoes you wanted to, but there was also that kind of comfort as well that you had that option. Some disadvantages is actually not seeing the facility. Physically not actually going there does put you a bit at a disadvantage. You can't get that full total, the vibe, that gut feeling that you have being around the area. You can't physically see it. All you can do is talk to the people that are with you on Zoom, maybe talk to people who live near there, look up the area itself.
Look it up on the internet, right?
So it's definitely different. So you start to have to work with your gut in a different way, but you'd be surprised through the Zoom interview, you can get a lot of interaction there as well. I think it was really fun. I think Dr. Haas mentioned the dinners that they would have the night before. We still, many programs still offered a virtual dinner either the night before or a few days before that helped ease us into the interview process. So I had one program that actually offered me and other co-applicants like a Grubhub coupon that we could order food and they said, have some wine, get whatever you want, just be relaxed and talk to us, have a natural conversation. And I think the more natural you are, even if it's on camera, whether you're in person or on camera, you can still,
It comes through.
exactly, it comes through even through the camera. So there is some positives that people, I think, discovered along the way.
Great. Let me send the same question to Dr. Ibrahim. Dr. Ibrahim, what was it like for you going through the match cycle during the pandemic?
So definitely I'd reiterate what Dr. Serene said. Not having to fly out to programs, and also the only thing I did not really like was like you lose the connection you have when you're in person.
Yeah.
That was one thing that is kind of lost. But other than that, you still get to meet everybody. You still get to communicate with the way you would want it to. And then I think also what was an advantage for a lot of people was because you didn't have to fly out, everybody applied to a lot more programs than they would have originally done. So that's another thing.
So let me keep on this same question line with you. How many different residencies did you apply to, and how many gave you interviews, and how did it finally end in Brooklyn?
All right, so this is a little different for me than it is for everybody else. So I'm not originally from the States, I'm from Antigua, so I require a hospital that would sponsor me the visa.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of limits certain programs that I can apply to. And I wanted personally to stay in the New York area. So I only applied to the New York and a few in New Jersey and one in like Pennsylvania. So I technically, risked it a lot by only applying to 51 programs. Usually people apply to 200 plus.
I was going to say, what's a normal?
200 plus, well, 150 to 200. Some even go beyond that. But financially, I didn't have enough to apply for that many. So I was like, okay, I'll apply to where I would want to go to and where I think my chances are of matching. And then I was like, okay, if it is that I just doesn't work out this year, then I'll save up to apply broadly for the next cycle. So I was comfortable enough to say, if I don't match this year, I don't mind waiting another year.
Right.
Because also AUA offers the graduate teaching fellowship program that I had intentions of doing for a year. So I would have filled up the year regardless.
Well, I'm sure you're not upset with the way things turned out, right?
Not at all, not at all, not at all. And then I got 2 interviews, and then I pre-matched on my second interview.
And you were like, okay, that's it, perfect.
Yep, so my second interview was with Brookdale, and that actually I got through a referral. So while working at the hospitals in Brooklyn, doing my electives, one of the residents there saw my work ethic, and he really enjoyed working with me, and he actually reached out to me asking, how's the interview process going? How many interviews have you gotten? How's that going? I told him so far I've only gotten 1. So he told me, did you apply to Brookdale? I said I didn't, because on their website it said that it didn't offer the visa, so I said it didn't really make sense to apply there. He's like, no, apply there. I know someone, I'll put in a good word for you. I'm like, okay. So I applied in December to Brookdale, and then I received the interview early January, the invitation, early January. And then 28th was the interview. And then right after the interview completed on the date, 15 to 20 minutes later, I got an email saying, are you available for a follow-up interview? And then my heart stopped. I'm like, yes, sure, of course. And they said in the email previously that be ready to receive, since it is a pre-match program, be ready at any point after the interview, you can be offered. But I was not expecting, the same day. I was expecting maybe a week, because they had I had chosen the interview dates within the first week of the options that I was given. So they had only interviewed, it was only the first week of interview. So I was like, okay, they're probably, 2-3 weeks in, and once they've interviewed a couple of people, and then I'll hear back from them. I was not expecting. So as soon as I opened the Zoom call for the follow-up interview, the entire crew was standing in the camera saying, we love you, we want you to be here. And I started crying. I was like, what? I was not expecting that at all.
What an awesome story.
So that's definitely, that's my experience. It's different from Dr. Serene and Dr. Saba's experience, but yeah.
But that's your story. And you know what? It goes to show it's good to know. It's good to know your stuff. It's good to have a great work ethic, which they saw, and it also helps when you have somebody that you might know at this particular hospital too.
Always put your best foot forward because you don't know who's watching you.
You don't know, right?
You don't know who's watching you. And I was not expecting him to reach out to me at all.
Yep. Well, let me go over to Dr. Saba. Dr. Saba, how many applications did you put in for residency?
So I definitely over applied, and I don't recommend that people do this, but I applied to about 200 plus programs. I spent about $5,000 in applications. Some people say, we are saving money on travel costs and stuff like that, so apply to more programs. But honestly, I don't think that's the best advice. Did I hear back from all these programs? No. Did most of these programs ghost me? Yes. So I think it's much better to research each program and see, can I really see myself living there? Do I get along with these people? Do I like the cold? Do I like the hot? Like, consider factors that are really, really important to you and only apply to those. But at the same time, I understand coming from the Caribbean as IMG students, we feel disadvantaged. So, we tend to take that advice to over apply. I kind of, if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't apply to as many programs. And I also applied to several specialties. I know emergency medicine is very competitive, so I targeted most of my programs to that. I also applied to like internal medicine, family medicine, and transitional year. So again, maybe spend a little bit more time figuring out what it is you really want. In my heart, I did know I wanted emergency medicine, but I could see myself happy in the other fields as well. So definitely spend time figuring out what you want. Definitely spend time saving money. I don't think people talk about this enough. It's so expensive to apply, right? Travel or no travel, it's very, very expensive. So start saving early so you can have more opportunities. And, just going back, I think this year in the pandemic, I think networking was the biggest thing that really, really helped me out. The place I matched at, I actually got my interview from Twitter. I know it sounds crazy, but that's how it worked out. I got a Twitter account and it was amazing for networking. I was able to meet a lot of residents, program directors. A lot of programs have pages on Twitter, and the program I matched at actually made a new page on Twitter. And in their description, it said, we're a brand new program. We're getting accredited in January. And so, okay, I was like, let me send them a message. So I sent them a message, and then they responded to me, we'll get back to you later. Then they got back to me within the following week saying we got early accreditation. So I was able to apply, and then I got the interview the next day. And that's the program I ended up matching in. So any sort of networking opportunity you can do is so, so helpful, because especially in the pandemic where people can't see you, right? Because a lot of my rotations were canceled. So people couldn't see my work ethic. People couldn't see I show up early. People couldn't see how interested I am in learning about emergency medicine. So any networking you can do, that's my best advice.
Maria, from those hundreds of applications you sent out, how many interviews did you end up having?
I got 11 interviews.
Good. And so I'm not a doctor, right? So do you get a good feeling after you have an interview, like, oh, I really nailed that one, I think I'm going to get that one? Or you're like, I don't have a chance at that one at all? Like, do you say that to yourself after you interview?
I feel like my first one, I was definitely nervous, because you don't really know what to expect going into it. But
Maria, that you there? I didn't know if Maria's Dr. Haas and Dr. Ohri, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right, great, guys. Looks like Maria had some network difficulties. So, gentlemen, coming back to you, you both started to talk about this in our first questions. So I'll start with Dr. Ohri first. When you're looking at potential residents, you're looking at their applications, you're looking at their STEP scores, you're probably looking at their grades, their volunteer work. But what are some of the intrinsic skills that you're looking for out of a potential resident at your hospital?
I think it's a great question. One of the advantages that any medical student could do is to do an elective rotation. to rotate at the hospitals that they're interested in applying. And I think that's when you really understand the intrinsic value that someone else is bringing into your program. You get to understand that their work ethic. You get to understand how they communicate with everyone or with you. And sometimes this personal connection, a personal bond that you develop while you're rotating helps you tremendously when it comes to the match process. Because ultimately, we want good residents that are going to be able to get along with everyone and work in a team. And that's what medicine is all about, to be able to work together and work and not to have any issues or any problems. So I think that's really important to us, communication and teamwork. And I think those two things really, you really could demonstrate those qualities when you're doing an elective rotation. Or sometimes you only have a few minutes to really connect with your program director or with your faculty members that are interviewing you. And if you are, you could speak well, you could connect with someone, I think you could transmit those qualities. And if you can, I think that's a plus point for you.
Great, thank you, Dr. Ohri. Dr. Haas, anything to add? Like other types of skills that you're looking at that go beyond the STEP score or the grades? What are some of the things that you look for?
Yeah, I'm sure it's a good question. So it's if we're looking at just a paper application, I think the thing that I hold at least a lot of weight to is letters of recommendation, because this is somebody else's opportunity to describe who you are. And in terms of paper, I think that's one of the strongest ways to separate yourself from somebody else. Now, obviously, COVID kind of put a dent in the easiest way to get a letter, which is, being around. But, it's difficult. But if you have the opportunity to get a letter, it may take you a lot of time. And that's you showing up, Dr. Saba said, you showing up at 7 a.m., being there on rounds. And what I want to see is you, for some reason, still there at 6:30 if we got an emergency going on. Like, oh, look, medical student still hanging around. I'm not necessarily even know the person's name yet, but I know that person's face. And really kind of fighting for yourself. You need to, as a med student, have a speaking role. If I don't know who you are, you can't ask me for a letter because I don't know who you are. Right. But if you have an assigned patient that you can speak about every single day, and be part of the team, that's going to get you noticed. And that's going to allow you to ask for a good letter. I think trying to do little mini presentations when you can during rounds. If you hear somebody talk about, I'm a pulmonary example, somebody's got hemoptysis or coughing up blood. Well, I don't know much about that. Doctor, can I talk about that 5 minutes, later this week during rounds? And, that's a nice little 5 minutes you get to talk in front of the team and teach everybody else. Because that's going to be.
Is it safe to say clinical students should see their clinical opportunities as tryouts, or that they should? Well, I guess they should. And should they look for clinical sites where they think they could potentially match or would like to match?
I think that's important. If you can try to arrange clinical rotations where you want to rotate, at least in the same city, I think that's important. Because as we kind of talked about earlier, when we're looking at applications, a ton of applications, if you're lived your entire life on the West Coast and now all of a sudden you want to come to the East Coast, sometimes we're like, is this person just kind of scared and all over the place, or do they really have a reason to come over? Are we going to spend the time to interview this person? But yeah, I think letters are important. I think when you guys ask for letters of recommendations, it's also important to make it easy on the person you're asking a letter for. Dr. So-and-so, I rotated with you on this service for this X amount of time. We had this patient. You talked about this with me and showed me, about chest x-rays, and I talked about this, and this way they can remember you and, kind of fill out a letter. So really kind of try to make it easy so that when you apply and I sit down and read this letter of recommendation and this person's talking about how you did all these things in 4 weeks and were there the whole time, it's right. It's a big difference. It can separate you from somebody else. As opposed to somebody who you may ask for a letter who's going to write 3 sentences, and that may be it.
Right. Who do you recommend that students were getting ready to start the match interview process? where should they get letters of recommendation from? Should it be faculty members? Should it be doctors that they shadowed? Like, what would be some good examples of letters of recommendation or people to ask?
So good question. So I it's a little combination. It's faculty members are fine. I think a little length of a time you're with the person is important too. When we read letters that say, I'm writing a letter on behalf of this student who I spent 1 week with. Yeah. That's hard. I understand though. It's really hard to get letters because it's really hard to get your face in front of people for a certain amount of time. So if that's all you have, that's all you got. But the more time you can spend with one specific person, the better. And if that requires you tail them around, they don't want to be tail them around a little bit. But yeah, I understand there's restrictions. But the more time, obviously, the better you can spend with a person you want to have you write a letter. I don't think there's one specific type of person. I think really anybody, the more senior, the better generally. I think, to be honest, a letter from a first-year instructor doesn't hold as much weight as somebody who's been doing this for 10 years or 15 years, at least writing letters and, at a program.
Dr. Musallam, let me kind of stay with this. When you were preparing your applications and your profiles to be sent out to all the residency directors for review, who did you approach for letters of recommendation, and why did you choose those individuals?
Yeah, so I'm glad you actually asked me this because I was thinking about the people I asked when Dr. Haas was speaking. So I applied real quick before I go into who. I applied to both internal medicine and family medicine. So that also guided my approach on who I asked for, because I wanted to make sure I had letters for both internal medicine and family medicine, including people I've worked extensively with. So I also, like Dr. Saba, I applied 200 plus programs, kind of equal both, total 8 interviews. 2 on the East Coast, because I got a lot of my rotations were on the East Coast. 6 were on the West Coast, including California, Arizona. 3 internal and 5 family medicine. That adds up to 8, right?
Yes. You're a doctor, not a mathematician.
So back to your question, who I approached. So I approached my internal medicine program. He was a program director at University of Maryland. He was also the residency director there, and he was the faculty head of all the medical students there. So he happened to be on the residence. He's a residency director and program director. So that was an easy choice because I spent 3 months with him. And if anyone else knows, at University of Maryland, they take about 4 to 6 students. So it becomes a very small group of people. So he gets to know you guys intimately.
Right, he gets to know you.
Exactly. And that was an easy choice. I always wish I could read these because there was 2 interviews that brought up that letter. So like everyone else is saying, letters do matter and they carry a lot of weight. I also asked another associate program director for my family medicine rotation, for my core rotation. So I had these 2 kind of like big head names for each specialty. And then I also asked another internal medicine he's an associate professor at Touro College of Medicine. And he's also one of the authors of Master the Board. And he was someone I worked closely with and I thought he was awesome. So he wrote me a letter. And I believe I had one more family attending who wrote me a letter as well. So those were my
4 good letters.
4 letters, 2 IM and 2 FM.
Good for you. Good for you. Dr. Saba, welcome back.
Thank you. Sorry, I think my internet cut out for a bit, but I'm back.
How many letters did you end up getting, and who did you ask?
I believe I got 4 letters as well. So since I applied to emergency medicine, the main letter we have to get is the SLOE, which is a standardized letter of recommendation, and specifically for emergency medicine. So once you do an emergency medicine rotation that has a residency, the program director and the faculty, they write that letter for you. So that was the main letter I was after, and it was stressful because I had both of my rotations canceled. So getting this letter meant that, I had a chance to apply to emergency medicine, which is what I really wanted in my heart. The other letter I got, I did like this amazing elective at University of Miami. It was like the EKG cardiology elective. Honestly, it's one of the best. one of the best electives I've ever done because it's a skill I'll be using every day as an emergency medicine doctor. So the cardiologist that taught that class was excellent, Dr. Esterson, and I approached him for a letter, and I was so happy that he was able to write me one. Another letter I got was from my internal medicine Saba professor. So the reason why I asked him for a letter is because I worked with him for 3 months during my internal medicine rotation, but also I did an elective. So I felt like he knew me very well, and he was able to write me a really good letter. And I think the fourth one was from a family medicine preceptor. So those are my 4 letters there.
Super. I'm not going to ask the same question to Dr. Ibrahim, but I am going to ask Dr. Ibrahim a question. And all the doctors, you guys can chime in. Actually, my first question is, as you were talking, Dr. Saba, were you a part of the Florida International programs at all, the core clerkship program or anything? Or were any of our new doctors part of that program? Just curious.
Yeah. Yes, I did that program.
Oh, you were? Okay. So you did all your, most of your cores in Florida?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you want to talk about that experience at all? Because usually the students that go through the core clerkship program have a very, very high match rate for AUA.
I see. So the reason why I chose to go into the program is because I wanted to be affiliated with a research-oriented university. So AUA doesn't have a lot of research opportunities. So I really wanted that research aspect. My undergrad is UCLA. So I come from a huge research university. So not having that in med school, I felt like I was missing something. So one of the reasons I joined FIU was because of that. In addition, I could live in one place for a year. So I didn't want to move around everywhere. So that made it perfect.
That is a
Miami
nice thing. Some people like to hop around and some people
No.
like to be in the same state.
I felt like a nomad. So I kind of wanted to be in one place. And plus living there is really fun, right? I love tennis. So they have a really big tennis culture. I met a lot of cool people outside of medicine. I had a great time. The only downside that I believe that this program has is most of the clinical sites are not affiliated with residencies. So when I rotated there, I believe only one of the sites, which was Westchester General Hospital, and they had a family med residency. But outside of that, it kind of limits your networking, right? So when you do decide to see where you want to do your electives and your core rotations, take everything, try to get advice from everyone and make your own decision.
Right, that's a good point. So they're mostly clinical sites. They're not future resident sites. So they're like teaching locations for
it's
students.
Really great for experience. For example, I got to help out on C-sections. I got to pop the sac. I helped to cut out someone's gallbladder. Like I got to do a lot of hands-on things because there's no residents there. So I felt like I learned a lot. I picked up a lot of Spanish. Most of the patients there are Spanish speaking. So that's something you just kind of learn naturally as you go. So I really liked those aspects and I felt really close to my attendings. I got great letters out of it. I did a research elective with FIU. I got a poster presentation out of it. So, I did the best that I could, but I feel like if we were able to get more spots with residencies, you could network more. And I feel like that could help more down the line as well.
Great. Lena or Serene, did you guys do the FIU programs at all or not?
Lena and I, though, had some common rotations in the Northeast, though, in Brooklyn.
So, so you guys were did you guys do them in anything in Rumsey at all? In Richmond, in Staten Island?
Yeah, I did 4 of my core rotations at Rumsey. So I liked the fact that I could also stay in one location and then build a rapport with attendings instead of jumping around to different hospitals.
But that's the nice thing about AUA because it provides you the opportunity. We have some locations like Florida International, and we have the different hospitals affiliated with Herbert Wertheim College of Medicine. We have Rumsey up in Staten Island. We have other locations throughout the United States where students want to do most of either their core or their electives in one spot they can. But a lot of students also like to hop around. As Dr. Saba says, it gives you a little bit of that networking opportunity. So you can do a couple in Florida, maybe go over to California, do something up in the Ohio area. So it all depends on what your preference is, but it sounds like the 3 of you all had a good experience. Now, Dr. Ohri and Dr. Haas, can I put you guys in the time machine? I'm going to put you in the time machine. You don't have a choice.
Yeah, I'd love to go back in the time machine if you got
I'm going
one.
to put you guys in the time machine. So, Dr. Haas, since you turned your camera on first, you graduated in AUA back in 2009. So you're one of our first graduating classes. That means
It was
first or second.
really, yeah.
What were the clinical rotations like back then in 2008, 2009?
So I did most of my clinical rotations between Baltimore and New York, kind of back and forth. I think most of them were. And then I set up a lot of my, best I could, I set a lot of my electives up, in Chicago and around the area, because I knew at some point I want to try to make it back here since I was from here. But I think, like was already mentioned, it required coordinating, ahead of time, like, a year to plan for the, a year ahead in terms of where you want to go and what you want to schedule. But yeah, it was a mix of New York, Baltimore, and Chicago pretty much for the third and fourth clinical years.
Great. And Dr. Ohri, I think you came into AUA right after Dr. Haas. Do you remember anything about your clinical experiences leading up to your residency?
Yeah, so a lot of my rotations were in New York as well, and what I tried to do was utilize a lot of my elective time towards programs that I wanted to apply. So I literally did electives in Louisiana, I did them in Florida, I did them in Michigan, but these were tailored to what the residency that I wanted. So I was, at the time that I was applying, I wanted to do internal medicine, and at the hospital that I worked at was where I did one of my elective rotations in Florida, which was in my Kendall in Miami, and I developed a great rapport with the program director, the faculty down there, the coordinator that hands out the interviews. So everything kind of just, it was a great environment, great people. I just connected with them, and it all worked out. And I really feel that's why I really feel strongly about doing elective rotations in places you're thinking of applying, because if you do so and they're accepting you, if they're accepting IMGs and they're accepting applicants, a lot of times you should get an interview there. And I think securing the interview is half the battle when you're applying for residencies.
I'm gonna stay on something you just said. You talked about IMGs, and for those that are joining us this evening on the Facebook Live, IMG stands for International Medical School Graduate. So Dr. Ohri and Dr. Haas, as your locations look for new potential doctors, do you have any preference whether it's somebody that comes from a U.S. med school or you're looking equally at IMGs? And what are your thoughts on IMGs versus USMD programs?
I'll quickly touch up on that. I think that, to be honest, it's just location, and I might be biased because I am an international graduate, of course. But at the end of the day, I mean, learning medicine, if whether you're an American graduate or you're an international graduate, medicine is medicine at the end of the day, and no one should be discriminated from where they come from. Of course, American graduates have that advantage because they've done everything here, and for the right reasons. But also, I think that we're not at a disadvantage in terms of education. I think that we're at a disadvantage in terms of the amount of residency spots they are. So that's what we're trying to make an effort and fight for, in terms of making a good impression, speaking with, connecting really well with your residents as well as your program directors and your GME faculty. But I personally, it really doesn't matter. Each medical student, whether they're AMG or IMG, to me they're all equal. Treat them with same respect, and I think that's really important. And how they come across to me is up to them, and that's their decision.
Dr. Ohri, I was going to ask, one of the first questions I asked you this evening was how many residency spots did you have at your location? I think you mentioned you had 8 spots or something like that this past year. So do you hold a certain amount of those spots for U.S. Graduates and a certain spot for international graduates, or does it go to the best candidate?
It goes to the best candidate, and as a program director, you should also, you can't be selective in terms of picking only AMGs or IMGs. Well, you shouldn't be, at least. I don't know if that exists, but at least at our program, we're picking good candidates that we feel are going to fit well into the program and that are going to accelerate. And we had a mixture of American graduates as well as a lot of international graduates. And I think that at the end of the day, we just want our program to excel, and we want to grow our programs with our residents, which add a tremendous value to our institution, and to our hospital, and to our community.
Dr. Haas, sticking with international medical school graduates, what are some characteristics that you would say describe a student that comes from a school like AUA?
Jerry, I missed part of that question. One more time, sorry.
Sure. What are some characteristics would you use to describe an AUA graduate or someone that graduates from an international medical school?
So I want to echo what Dr. Ohri said too. I think, some characteristics that I see, at least in terms of foreign medical grads, I generally see, I think we try a little harder. I'm a foreign medical grad. I knew from the start it was going to be a little bit harder. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's going to, hopefully pay off in the end and builds a little bit of character. It's not always easy. I think as soon as you really kind of secure a residency spot, which is difficult, I think that stigma, if you want to make it, quote unquote, make it, that stigma goes away. Essentially, I don't care if you're my resident, I don't care what planet you came from. It doesn't matter where you came from. I want you to be able to do your job and do it well and do it reliably. So we're not really asking what med school you came from as soon as you're an intern. It's pretty much, do you know where you're going from here? It's just a matter of kind of getting that residency spot. And then I really think it's a level playing game all around.
Yep, that's a great answer. Let me move to our three lady doctors. I'm going to take you guys back to AUA, and not too long ago, right? Most of you just graduated this past fall. So we'll start this time with Lena, because Lena, you haven't started first yet, so it's your turn. What were some of your most rewarding moments at AUA that you would like to share? And how did these experiences provide you with the education to become a physician?
So let me think. Most rewarding. I'm biased.
And what experiences helped shape you into the physician that you are now?
I'd say I'm biased because I'm from here. So definitely being able to attend medical school while being at home and having family and everything. And it is basically the only university we have on the island. So it is a rewarding experience overall, regardless. Right. But definitely the fact that it offers, we can still get medical education and still be considered part of the medical community in the States while studying abroad. So that's definitely an opportunity. And let's see, I'm not really sure how to answer that. Let's see,
maybe I can frame it better. Were there any extracurricular activities or organizations that you joined to help I guess mold you who you are, maybe separate you from others, help make good contacts amongst your peers? Any extracurricular activities or clubs that you might have gotten involved in?
So what the school actually does is they do a lot of community research, community outreach programs. So I was part of the one of the community programs that did health fairs. So which also they did a health fair. They volunteered for the health fair, which is also at my church. So I was able to organize a health fair alongside AUA and be part of the organization. And that was actually, I put that in my application. I was asked about that as well. Seeing the community work that I was involved in, the volunteer work. And that's one thing AUA really does put forward, because they really do give out a lot to the community.
And actually, Dr. Rice is our associate dean for admissions, and he's on all of our admissions committees. And he had a question today as we were speaking to some students. And one of the questions was, what do you look for most out of a student that's aspiring to even go to medical school? So 4 or 5 years ago. And his top question is someone that's not afraid to volunteer, roll their sleeves up, and get their hands dirty. And that was one of the best answers I heard on today. Let me ask Serene. Serene, what were some of the experiences that helped shape you at AUA? And what were some of the clubs and extracurricular activities that you might have been involved in?
This is great. This feels like another interview. But a fun interview because we're all. So a few things. One thing that was actually attractive to me about the AUA curriculum in the beginning, back from Med 1 first semester, is that we all got exposure to clinical medicine day one. versus some, I think medical students in the US, they wait till I think a little later to expose them. So we were doing OSCEs and those type of things, and kind of like being challenged to think like a clinician from day one and thinking of differential diagnosis, which is going to be our foundation for all of us, regardless of what specialty we choose in medicine. So that was something I liked about AUA. So when I did my CS exam, I was one of the few lucky ones who just barely made it before the cancellation. So I felt more comfortable because of all the experience I had at AUA, to be very honest with you. The other thing is I do love the people. My core classmates, I found it to be a very collaborative type of environment if you really stepped out of your comfort zone. And I think there's a really strong tutoring program there. I know Dr. Saba, she tutored as well. I think Lena did as well. So there was a lot of collaboration. We helped each other out. There was no, I didn't feel a sense of cutthroatness between us. I felt like we were helping each other. It's like a team effort kind of thing. So that was important. As far as extracurriculars, we are often asked in interviews about our hobbies, which is just everyone applying, make sure you put something interesting about yourself that makes you stand out. I did some scuba diving, so one of my interviews we talked about scuba diving. So on the island, so that's something that stands out. And lastly, I did quick shout out to my co-founder. So I founded an interest group on campus with a former classmate who matched last year. Her name is Dr. Tibble. So if she's listening, and so we started the oncology interest group. So back then I was thinking of going into oncology, and we, like Lena said, I was interested more into outreach and creating health fairs, and just organizing, kind of meeting any sort of needs of the community in underserved areas, and increasing education in the Caribbean community about pap smears and breast exams and all these things. So I thought that was something very rewarding, and to stay kind of connected to what we really want to do in life, a little outside of the books.
That's pretty cool. Thanks for sharing those. I just got a note saying we only have time for a couple more questions, and we have so many questions we could go on for a while. This has been a great discussion, but I want to ask my final questions around the pandemic, and I want to ask Dr. Ohri and Dr. Haas. The first question is, did the pandemic change the different specialty areas that you were looking for out of this year's incoming class? So did things kind of change in the specialty areas based on the pandemic? Either guy can go first. Who wants to go first? Kevin?
I mean, my personal, I don't think we had unless there's data out there that I know of different, I don't feel like there's been a big swap or shift in terms of, and I'd be interested to hear the students take on this actually, or some of the younger people take on distribution of specialties that we're going to apply to. I think across at least my medicine kind of realm, I feel like most of the percentages of applications stayed about the same, maybe just more people applied to more programs. I didn't see any big shift in terms, or appreciate any big shift of I no longer want to be a medicine doctor, or no longer want to be a surgeon or anything like that because of the pandemic.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin. Dr. Ohri, what about yourself and your location? Did you find any shifts in specialty areas or demand?
No, I think I agree with Dr. Haas. I mean, in terms of the specialty requirements, there are certain specialties that have higher amount of residency positions. So they're always the ones that receive a lot of the ones that receive more applications naturally. But I don't think that I personally, at least to my knowledge, I don't think the pandemic catered towards one specialty more than the other. Now, of course, our pulmonary and critical our fellows or colleagues were working really hard during the pandemic, and we relied on people like Dr. Haas tremendously, and they were working really, really hard. But in terms of the residency positions, I don't think that has really changed as of yet.
Okay, so that was just an interesting question that I had as I planned for this evening. Let me ask our three new doctors. I'll start with Dr. Saba first. You mentioned that emergency medicine was your top choice. What made you narrow down, or how did you figure out that you wanted to specialize in emergency medicine versus, let's say, internal medicine or family or something like that?
So for me, I actually did a lot of volunteering before I went to med school. So as an undergrad, I did this program is called Care Extenders. So it was kind of there where I found my love for emergency medicine. And this program, I was a volunteer for about 4 hours each week. And each 3 months, I was able to switch departments. So I saw what the labor delivery was like. I saw the medical floors. I saw the emergency department. I saw surgery. So I got a really nice idea of kind of how hospital life is. And I've always been drawn to the emergency room. As soon as I show up, it's like the time doesn't exist. Like you go to your job, but you're having so much fun that it doesn't feel like a job. And like before you know it, the shift's over and you got to go home and people are kicking you out for you to go home. So that for me just felt really fun. I'm also a kind of an active person. So an ED doc is always on their feet. They're never sitting down. They're never like waiting around for people. You're the person that's proactive. You're the person that's always like making the changes. So I found that it was a really good fit for my personality. And I just really enjoy seeing the patients. I love homeless patients. I love immigrants. I love everybody that comes into the door. And I don't discriminate against anybody in any sort of way. So I feel like emergency was just the perfect fit for me. And I'm really happy it worked out that way in this match.
Good for you. Serena, what about yourself? How did you finally narrow down your specialty area?
I'll try to be brief on this one, but
Take your time. I have all night. My wife's downstairs. She doesn't mind. She's like, keep them upstairs all night.
This was a hard question because not till the very end did I finally decide. So when I applied family medicine and internal medicine, I applied equally in both because I can't narrow down to one thing that I love. So both options can get me where I want to go, which was to be a full spectrum doctor. And I really wanted to become a hospitalist. It's one of those things where I just want to be in the hospital. I want to admit people. I want to be in the hospital at all times. I could live there if I wanted to. That was kind of like something that always sparked some joy in me. So you kind of go with whatever sparks joy. So it was a really hard decision to make because I was happy with either. And even in my top 3 choices, I had internal medicine, family medicine was my second choice. And I think I had my other internal medicines a little later. So I based it a lot out of the program that I liked. Did I feel like the program vibed with me, or did they vibe with me? So in the end of the day, I could have been a family medicine physician, but I ended up with my first choice, which was internal medicine. I also realized that pediatrics I love children so much, but may not be for me. So that was another reason why I put internal medicine over family medicine at the end of the day.
Awesome. Thank you. And Lena, how did you finally settle on your specialty area?
Well, it was definitely a difficult choice because I really enjoyed every core rotation that I did. And I could imagine myself being that person. Maybe in all of them except pediatrics. I was only a fan of kids. But then to narrow it down, it was during my electives where I was in the ICU and I was just blown out of my mind. I really, really enjoyed it. And I'm like, okay, this is definitely where I see myself for the rest of my life. So, and I know to get to ICU, internal medicine would be the best shot to start off with. So that's when I targeted to continue my sub-I elective and all the other internal medicine electives so I can get good letters.
Good for you. Looks like all 3 of you made great choices for yourself, and you're going to impact a lot of families as you go forward. One more question, and I promise that we'll wrap up for that. I wanted to end with a fun question. So I'm going to ask this question not only to our new doctors, but to our veteran alumni that are on with us today. And I really want to know is match day was last week. What was the first thing you did when you heard that you matched, and who was the first person you called? So who wants to go first?
I'll go first. I'll get it going.
Okay, Kevin.
All right. I'm pretty sure I was in my brother's apartment. I was on his couch. I'm fairly certain the first person probably was my mom, to be honest. Probably my mom. Yeah.
And what went through your head? Oh my God, like this is it, I did it, or
I think kind of just disbelief, more so disbelief, and is it real? You kind of see that, and as soon as you kind of confirm it and everything, it's I think it was my brother's couch. I was in Chicago.
And called mom.
Yeah, call my mom.
I can only imagine that conversation with your mom. She must have been screaming.
She's used to screaming out. I got a few brothers. She's used to always screaming.
Thanks, Kevin. Let me go to one of the ladies. Oh, ladies, who wants to go first? Who wants to share what was the first thing you did when you heard the news, and who was the first person you called?
I can go. On Monday I found out if I matched, and I think I was just in bed. We're on the West Coast, so it's early. It's like 8 a.m. when we find out. So I just got the notification. My heart kind of sank, and I looked, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I matched. So, I talked to my family, my boyfriend, they're right there with me. And then on Friday, it was a really fun part because we both found out we matched. So we decided to plan like a quick road trip to the slopes. So when we opened the email, we took the lift to the top of Snow Summit, and there was like a little table there. We smuggled a bottle of champagne up to the mountain and we opened the email and we celebrated. We called our family on Zoom. And then we had the AUA Zoom session. So it was really, really rewarding and memorable. I'll always remember that day. Yeah.
I'll never forget that either. That was a lot of fun.
So much fun.
Let's go up to Dr. Ohri. Dr. Ohri, take you back in your time machine again. What were you doing when you heard the news? What was the first thing you did, and who did you call?
I was at home and I was just on my bed. I opened up the email, and then once it says you match, I literally jumped out of my bed, and my mom was downstairs and she screamed. She's like what's going on? And then I went downstairs and I'm like, oh, I matched, and my whole family, they were ecstatic because I was the first physician, like a doctor that I became a doctor in the family. So it was a big deal. It was something special. But I started with a big bang upstairs, and then she got scared.
You scared your mom, but then you shared the news with her. That's awesome. Let's go to Lena. Lena, did you let all of Antigua know that you matched?
Not really. I didn't actually. I should have, but I didn't. So I was actually in the same spot right here because it was not too long after the interviews when they called me back. I was actually on my way out, leaving after the interview, and then I checked my phone suddenly that I had gotten an email from them, so I had to go back, change back, fix back my hair and everything because they want to call me back. And then once they opened that Zoom call, I started crying, and my sister was right in the room next to me, so then she heard everything. So she was the first person that heard.
These are moments, obviously, because you look at Dr. Haas and Dr. Ohri, they both graduated about 10 years ago, and they still remember like it was yesterday, and you guys are going to remember this as well. Serene, you're the last story of the night. How did you hear? Where were you when you heard? And who was the first person you called?
So Monday and Friday, just like my friend Masha here said, two different reactions. So Monday, we found out if we matched. And I'm on the West Coast as well. So it actually came 5 minutes early. So I was actually on the phone trying to figure out how to like access something. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll find out early through the NRMP website. And right away, I got this notification on the banner, and all I saw was congratulations. So that was like a surprise because it came 5 minutes early. So it was like oh my God. So I barely had a chance to it was like very exciting, and I felt relief, absolutely. And my sister was there. I was at her place, so she was the first person I told, and then called my best friend and my mother. On Friday, it was a bit more, I felt like my nerves were on fire for Friday. I felt like I had more pressure because I was like, I don't know what specialty I'm going to land.
You know where you were going. That's so strange.
It was a nice relief because I actually offered a position as a pre-match in November, and it was the hardest no that I ever had to say, and it was like the most stressful thing to be like, what if I end up not matching? I would have never forgiven myself. I was offered an opportunity back in November, and I'm glad I waited and followed my gut for a bigger opportunity. So Friday came, I was walking the dogs, got the email, nerves are on fire. I literally dropped the phone. Thank God I have a strong cover because this was the crying one, and I was just so relieved. And my mother was the first one I called. So,
I'm sure she was psyched. She was happy, obviously.
Yeah, she screenshotted my face and everything. It was very, very in tears. It was great though. Congratulations to Lena and Masha.
Yeah, and so congratulations not only to Maria and Lena and Serene, but also to Dr. Haas and Dr. Ohri. Yes, you matched some time ago, but just for representing AUA well, you're doing wonderful things within your career. You always make us all AUA proud. We have great alumni at AUA. I have not met an alumni yet that is just not fantastic and just a great representative for the school. So panelists, thank you all for coming on, sharing your stories. I'm not sure how many people are watching us on Facebook today, but maybe you're going to impact someone who might be looking to become a doctor, somebody that's really not sure right now, maybe having a tough time in medical school, might be hearing your story and saying, you know what, I can do this now. So thank you all for sharing your stories. I wish all of you the best of luck. I'll be in touch with all of you guys for different alumni webinars and those different things. But for our audience out there, please make sure that you continue to follow all of AUA's social channels to see what topic we're tackling next. We do these live streams with different topics every month, and our next one will be, what are we, in March? Probably the end of April. So until then, thank you, everyone, and congratulations to all of our new matches. Proud of you guys.
Thanks, everyone.